This first hour-long talk is an introduction to screening, prevention, progress monitoring, assessment, and intervention. And again, note that I'm an author of some of the things we're going to talk about today. And I want to start off with this idea that with the rabbit and the tortoise, that it's okay to go slow to go fast. Does that resonate with anybody out there? Yeah. We sometimes in education, and I will say we because it's something I do, we chase shiny objects. And this level of school change and reform and working with kids who have who are at risk for, or our schools are at risk for not serving them, or have social emotional behavioral disabilities and disorders that are pretty significant. This is not a quick fix, and this is not a 1 hour training that's going to radically change schools. This is a drop in the bucket of the very hard work that we all have to do every day to make our systems more responsive and more equitable for the kids that we serve, and for the teachers, faculty, staff, administrators, school psychs, counselors, nurses that work with our students too, because we sometimes forget that part of the equation. And if you guys are out there are facing what I believe you're facing, it's tremendous shortages of professionals working with these folks, and lots of early retirements and folks leaving the field. So I think better systems are part of this as well. So this push play series, each one is going to look about the same in terms of structure. There's going to be a brief micro training at the beginning. Then we're going to have some discussions. Then there's going to be a little bit about next steps and things you might do. And the series is going to cover this intro. Then next week, we're going to talk about universal screening models and implementation. And that will be very hands-on, and I'll share a lot of my experiences in rolling those programs out. Then we'll talk about school risk, how to use that data to set up prevention programs. Then we're going to talk about how to for progress monitoring, and we'll cover a variety of things, everything from the free stuff to the state-of-the-art technology, how to support teachers, and then the last one will be assessment and interventions. And that'll walk us through toward the end of September. Right, so the purpose here today is to talk about screening, prevention, progress monitoring, assessment, intervention, in terms of big picture overview. What's the state of the art for prevention and treatment of social, emotional, behavioral risk and disorders? And how do we promote health and well-being of our students, faculty, and staff? It's something that I'm concerned about in higher ed on a daily basis as we prepare educators to go out in the field. Is this something that resonates with you guys as being important or on your radar? Like the health and well-being of not just the kids, but the adults that are engaged in this too? So a little overwhelming at times, given all of this. I don't have very many slides with dense text, but this is one. Just to state the need in case you have it or don't have it. Oh, screen sharing is stopped. Screen sharing window is closed. Chris, did we lose something there?
Try again, Kimber, I'm sorry. I
No
think
worries.
I hit the wrong button.
Okay.
Okay, I see the PowerPoint, but yeah, you need to go to present or the slideshow.
Yeah, let's see if we can do that. Screen sharing.
Sorry about that.
Screen technology is so much fun, isn't it? Let's try this. And this. Are you seeing a
Yes.
PowerPoint? Okay. Are you seeing the notes version or like the full picture?
We're seeing the notes version, yeah.
All right, let's see if I can get rid of that. Not helpful. Sorry for the tech difficulties. Let's try one last time.
This is great because it'll help our teachers and people working in schools get ready for the tech challenges they'll face this year. I think we've all been there at this point.
All right, and Chris, you have somebody working on the room frontage,
Yes,
managing the room.
yes. Okay.
All right, I am struggling here. How about now?
It's the notes.
Yeah.
If you go to the, I think it's that square thing at the bottom of the slide on the left, up a little bit more. Not that one, the other square thing. Go back. The one that looks like a monitor. I think that's is that the display one?
There we go. Let's try that.
Or up at the top, do you see where it says display settings? Does that let you switch it back to? On the left, up there. There you go. We did
Okay.
it. Hooray.
Yay. Thank you so much. Team effort.
It's just it's a little bit too big.
It's too big.
Yeah, if you, let's see, if we close the,
There
there it is. Perfect.
Oh,
We got it. We're going.
really?
Yep, it's perfect. It's fine.
Well,
So leave it as it is.
I think so.
All right.
We can read it. It's working.
Okay. We'll go with that. All right. Let's cover some of this big picture data. Interestingly enough, in the K through 12 classrooms where children's problems are first identified, there's only one school site for every 1,200 students, and the ratio really should be about 1 to 500. Very, very disturbing to me is that the suicide attempts have been dramatically increasing among adolescents aged 12 to 17, and that girls' visits to emergency departments after suicide attempts have increased by 51% over 2019. A high of more than 1,000 weekly visits by the spring of 2021, and that 80% of youth with severe depression receive no treatment or insufficient treatment. This is just a few tidbits of a very long punch list of problems related to externalizing and internalizing related challenges that we're seeing with kids in schools. The absolute only way we're going to put a dent in this is if we have strong partnerships with our communities and even across schools within a district, especially for our high mobility populations, that we work to build coalitions of support for the idea of universal screening. We still don't do that across this country very well. We do it for health and vision, hearing. We are still not doing that for social, emotional, behavioral risk. We do it for reading, we do it for spelling, we do it for math. We just are missing the boat on this. And I think now more than any other time, the needs are just so tremendous that I think this is someplace, an opportunity for us to really move the needle to engage in universal screening. School districts often have existing resources that are pocketed and we don't communicate, we don't talk well between one another. So schools or districts may have little pockets of resources available. And I don't mean cash on hand, I mean programs or staff that if we can find time to talk to one another and do a resource map across our district about what services we have available, I think that improves our use of the very limited resources that we do have. And then triage and communicate those resources out. We're going to talk a little bit about that across the, started to say semester, but the next 6 weeks. And also educate the educators. Depending on where your teachers come from, what kind of training they had, what level of certification they've received. They might be tremendous experts in math, science, language arts, and know very little about human development or the social, emotional, behavioral needs of kids. Or they might be quite well skilled in applied behavior analysis, but not really sure how to translate some of those knowledge and skills practices into academics. So educating our educators has got to be a part of an ongoing focus of care for what we do. This idea of comprehensive support for academics, social, emotional, and behavioral needs is critical if we're going to make a dent in what's happening right now and what's going to be manifest across the next decade. It's not going away, and now is really the time to start thinking about what we're going to do about this. So we're triaging our immediate needs, but we know that these are long-term challenges that we're facing. One comprehensive social, emotional, behavioral approach model includes a level of universal programming. I would offer the Behavior and Emotional Skill Building Guide. It's a book I wrote, but there's lots of materials out there, free and commercially available, to support how do you engage in universal programming at your school. Universal screening. I'll give you a list of a few screeners that are available. Next week, we'll talk about 10 or 11 of them. Remediation for the students that show up as having elevated levels of risk, that we engage with interventions or a small group or targeted programming to help those students not roll into a chronic disability category. Assessment needs to be a part of that comprehensive system, and then individualized tier 3 kinds of intervention, and progress monitoring to see how students are doing, exiting programs when appropriate to free up resources, and measuring progress and identifying strengths as we go through. Why do we need to do this? The resources that we have are very scarce. It's no different where I am here in higher ed. We are pressed for dollars. We are pressed for people. We are pressed for skill sets, but the needs are greater than the resources. The needs are not scarce. Only the resources are scarce. So we need to find efficient ways to identify who needs intensive treatment and intervention. We can't provide special education to all students. We don't provide individualized education plans to all students. We do that for the students that are in need. And the most objective way to do that is through a universal screening process. The best way to not miss out on the students who are internalizing is to do that through a universal process. Probably 1 in 5 is too low a number given what we have experienced this past year. But in the past, and the US Surgeon General's report to Congress indicates 1 in 5 students would qualify for mental health services. That 20% is woefully underserved in our schools. You're over here on my screen now, but would you agree? Does this match your experiences? That we're not serving the number of students that we have needs for? I think that kind of holds up across the country. So the way to find them is through universal screening. It's a valid, highly reliable method for determining which students have elevated levels of risk. And depending on which one you use, sometimes it's which schools or teachers have elevated levels of risk at serving high need populations. Here's a list of a few. We'll get to talk about those next week. Here's an example of the BASC screener. Some of the items, these are very simple, quick, easy to do processes that you can have students fill out screeners about themselves. You can have parents do these forms. We'll talk about this more next week in detail, the how-to part. You can have teachers do this in an after-school hour faculty meeting. You can hand these out for people to do electronically or paper version. It doesn't take that long to screen a class, and the data that you get is tremendous. You can identify which groups of kids have elevated levels of risk, and what you can start planning for that ahead of time. We'll talk across the next few weeks about a possible timeline and what that might look like for preparing teachers, getting them on board with the idea, forming a leadership team that will answer questions or navigate challenges with unions or with teachers who feel like they don't want to spend their time doing this kind of thing. And also, what do we have in place for universal programming? What kinds of school-wide expectations do we have? What kinds of curriculum are we using to teach whatever it is that you feel like are your prevention priorities? And how do we operationalize that leadership team? And then if we're using the BASC, the BEST screener, the BASC-3 BEST screener, we would do that about a minimum of 6 weeks in, where faculty know their students. Again, more details to come on screening. So I want to ask you a live survey question with a poll. How would you evaluate your current universal programming and screening? Chris is going to put that up for us. You think you have a fully implemented program, curriculum, really well-trained people? Is this a work in progress? You haven't considered how to implement this kind of a system yet. You've tried this kind of stuff in the past, but it doesn't really stick. Where are we in this?
All right, we're getting most people to respond. Right now, it's a work in progress for 51%, and we have not yet considered for 38%. So those are the two main choices that are being endorsed.
And 5 or 6%, and probably you guys also reflect a best case scenario in the country, because you're somebody who's actually giving up your hour to be here and talk about this, learn about this, get some ideas for this. So best case scenario, this is 6% fully implemented would be a great start for our country and Canada. I think last time I looked at the data, it was fewer than 2% of schools were engaged in universal screening practices for a variety of legitimate and understandable reasons. That we are a work in progress for half of us. I take great optimism in learning, and that gives me a lot of hope for our future. Not yet considered it. So glad you're here to think about it and think about what this might mean for your school or district, or trying it in the past and not sticking. Every exercise machine I have ever purchased would go in that last category, because these things are their work, their real work. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. The stressors that we're all experiencing, and the chronic stress facing faculty, staff, and students remains unprecedented. I have personally seen and experienced so many students reporting that they're not sure why they're there. They're not sure why they're in school. They're not sure what the point of all of this is. The world feels like a very chaotic place to a lot of our students in schools. And I think it feels that way to some of our educators as well. So this is the context that is different than what we've ever faced before. And what I would suggest is that we can focus on the treatment at the very far end for our most severe kids, or we can spend more time focusing on prevention. We know that a quarter of pediatric visits are related to problem behaviors. Parents are not coming to schools to talk about that. They're going to their physicians. So they're not finding us the ideal place to talk about the needs that they're experiencing with their kids, or a place to get help. Teachers are leaving at an alarming rate, and this was pre-pandemic. And if we go to the point of having students diagnosed with emotional and behavior disorders or disabilities or emotional disturbance, they are 2 to 4 grade levels behind in academics. Typically, we're not catching them early. They have a tremendous dropout rate, 46%. They're expelled at much higher numbers. They experience a host of negative post-school and in-school outcomes. And I would offer to you that these punitive contacts with teachers and peers impact the rest of us also. These are not kids that typically encourage folks to stay in education, right? And so they need help, the families need help, and our faculty and staff need help. And we need to get that help out sooner rather than later. And I would say this is an ethical and a moral decision point for us as educators in this country, in Canada, in any other countries that are here with us today. if we don't do this with earnestness, what is it saying about our recognition of a very critical need in our entire democratic population of future citizens that we are not serving? So if you have a system in place, I would encourage you to describe and communicate and re-communicate that system to those above you in administration, to all the new faculty that are coming on board. The turnover rates are so high that systems can dissolve because we don't do the onboarding and take the time to mentor and bring new people into our culture of schools. So for those 6% of you that have really great working systems, I would encourage you to spend the time making sure you're maintaining those relationships of maintaining that system. For those of you working in progress, keep talking and keep describing to others what it is that you're doing and why, what those goals are, so they know. And also, so we're not chasing all kinds of new and small shiny objects, but rather we're coalescing around a shared vision and goal and moving forward with unity and one set of energy. Or our efforts can get diffused. If you need a system, start by building your team. We know that in the big picture, we need some kind of universal programming and screening. We need targeted programs and assessment to identify specialized planning, and that this stuff is universal across all grades, ages, levels of students that we work with. But where you start, if you haven't yet, is to build a team, a leadership team that's going to work through this. The systems approach is needed. Partnerships with communities within and across schools and districts, building coalitions of support, identifying those existing resources, triage and communicate about the resources and programming, make sure you're educating those educators to build this support for all of the needs of students. We know that students can't focus. We know we can't focus if we've got emotional stuff going on. We're not attending to our jobs. We're not engaging in our work in the same way. Quick question for the chat room that I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your greatest barriers to engaging in universal screening? Half of us are in progress. Some of us have it nailed down. Those 6%ers, you might share what your barriers were or how you overcame them. Some of us just now starting to think about how we might do this. We should have a chat room available.
Okay, we have afraid of over-identification.
Great.
Focus has been seems to be on academics,
Okay.
administrative buy-in, ELL and screening.
Oh, good. Good. Some of these screeners we'll talk about next week have they have audio, they have Spanish, and one of them I think has like 72 languages available.
How do you support all the kiddos if the needs are greater than what we can support?
Good.
So over-identification. Yep. Someone has not gotten far enough to have barriers, so that's good. They'll get some ideas on how to approach the next challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of resources, again, for those identified via screening.
Yeah.
Now, someone made a good point. There are ESSER funds out there now. So Tiffany got it, her group got approved for ESSER funds. So
Awesome.
That's a way of getting more resources. Good.
So I remember being in one school district that the principal shared with me when they got their list of data back on students who had elevated levels of risk of, I don't have that many disciplinary placements. And we talked through the idea that these weren't all going to be disciplinary cases, that these were students at risk for social, emotional, and behavioral problems. And they reflected kids who were, some kids who were crying in school on a regular basis, some kids who were getting bullied and victimized in other ways, some kids who might not yet be in the disciplinary seat, but if we could intervene early, might be somebody that they skip over and not spend all those efforts on and resources. Another school I worked with had, they triaged their needs. They didn't have the resources to meet with all of those students. There's no federal mandate that we're providing functional behavioral assessment for these kinds of things. This is about identifying who's out there and who has elevated levels of needs. And so small groups and ways to do check-in, check-out, and some of the other low-cost pieces were what that school chose to do. And they chose a handful across the top, and they said, we're going to start here, we're going to start small, we're going to do it really well, we're going to make sure the system works for us, we're going to figure out all the glitches, and then we're going to continue on down the list and work with kids a little bit at a time. They were also able to alert and work with teachers about who they had in the classroom. That seemed to make a difference. In another example of an experience I had, the classroom teacher said, you know what, I really don't think it's this kid that's at risk. It's that I don't really like this child. I'm having trouble interpersonally with this child. They're triggering me all the time. And they just switched rosters. She had a co-teacher that had half a class of the same age grade level. And they swapped out 2 kids. And that student who had been at really elevated level risk was doing much better in the other person's classroom. So it was a really great practical tool to identify all kinds of ways to make modifications on the ground. Some of them didn't cost any money at all. It was just about awareness and being able to meet individual needs. We'll talk about all of that stuff in detail next week. All of these are very real barriers. And for those of you that typed them in, I think you appreciate that. These are the things you wrote down are what's legitimate across the country. It's not specific to where you are. And there are a variety of techniques that we can talk about on how to bridge those barriers, but it's little bites of the elephant at a time. So I'd like us to go into breakouts for about 7 minutes. I'm calling this a 7-on-7. We may shorten a little bit of it, but Chris is going to help us go in breakouts, and I'd like for you to talk about your most pressing need facing you right now in school and your goal for the year. This will give you a chance to interact with on the ground professionals across the country, Canada, who knows where else, and hear what's going on at their school. I think this could be a really valuable learning tool for all of us. So I'd love to have you stay with us as we go through this. We're going to do 7 minutes in a breakout, and the attempt is going to be 7 back. So since we're running a little bit late, let's give you 7 minutes in the breakout, and we'll maybe do 5 minutes when you get back, something like that. So let's hit for breakouts. Chris?
All right. All the rooms should be opened. You should be directed towards your room.
Super. And we'll call you back in just a little bit of time.
I had left my group thinking that we had closed. Are we back together with the whole group or still separated?
We're back together with the whole group, I believe.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
All back,
Okay.
whole group.
Okay.
So
I
I,
didn't even finish. Mhm.
I got to hear some great
Okay.
or some descriptions from Ohio and Maine, and I think we are all, I hope you guys at least felt or heard some shared sense of the enormity of what we are all engaged with. High caseloads, efforts to implement programs, tight resources and high levels of needs for schools. And I see Melody in her mask. I've got mine here on my desk. My door is closed, but mask-free days, mask-full days. So I'd love for us to be here as a little bit of a community across the next few weeks to be able to talk and share more information. It's a lot. It's a lot. What that does tell me, though, is that this is the time for us to make a huge change and impact in the way we do business in schools and elevate the things that we've always known have been there and always been problems under the surface that we've had the liberty to ignore, except for the most chronic or challenging of problems. And it's just way more present for folks that were able to ignore these issues in the past. We can't ignore them. We're at 13 minutes. I'm wondering if some of you from your other groups would like to share back across teams, if you heard any themes or any commonalities of experience that you'd like to share with everybody here. I'm not moderating hand raising here, so you're welcome to just jump out if you wish to.
I don't know about groups, but it seems like everybody just doesn't either have the resources, or you test and then you don't know where to go from there. How do you implement it so that it goes beyond, like the gentleman that was in my group, he's not even in a school setting anymore. He's the next step after a school setting, or probably prior to jail, or during that time, you know, for some kids. Myself in a special ed setting, I think everybody kind of, I'm seeing through the chat that like there's people that have the tribal too, but it's just like, oh, well, it's up to you guys. Or, you know, we've referred them on for behaviors, we'll put them on an IEP. Okay, so, you know, yeah, I'm special ed, but I have an enormous caseload. What am I supposed to do with them? And we do the, you know, do the entire behavior intervention piece and build a plan and build some goals, but then what resources are available for me to be able to help those kids? Because you can build as many goals as you want, but if you don't have something to back it up, or some kind of a curriculum to look forward to, or trying to help them in the exact same way, individualized, but with some kind of resource to follow through, where are you supposed to go with that from there? I don't know. There are other school districts around me that have different ways that they handle, you know, you've got your PBIS, you've got the, oh, what is the one? It's almost like I can't remember what it's called, but it's like, you know, you have that conversation, they're taking responsibility for what they're doing.
Restorative practices?
Yes, yes. And I really like that one, but I don't have any of
MTSS.
Yes.
MTSS is the other one.
And I don't have any of those resources and have never been trained on them. And nobody here in the district really seems, as far as when you talk to teachers, can you get the buy-in and from the administrator to get everybody to get on board to do it and do it across the board? And that's my biggest problem, I think, is that bringing something to somebody that everybody will believe in. If you can't get the buy-in and you can't get everybody to do it, then it fails. Ultimately, you know, a few people will continue doing it. It might help a few kids, which would be great. But in the long run, aren't you looking at trying to, you know, either intervene, do the testing, find, you know, screeners, anything to find out what they have going on, and then help them all the way across the board? And it just doesn't seem to work out.
You nailed it, Cheryl. It's a great segue for my next slide, and that's exactly where at least half of you are in this kind of process. And these models are have a lot of similarity in the idea of teaching some kind of best practice or skills or education about emotion and behavior and self-regulation to all of our students, being clear about our expectations, whether that's interaction and taking responsibility for ourselves, or whether it's you know, didactic rules and modeling what that looks like. But this idea of resource and buy-in is that consistent barrier. Let me share with you what I hope will be my PowerPoint. Do you see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Too small still? Too big?
A little bit small.
Just right? Okay, let's try and make
If
it
you
bigger.
could go to
How about now?
That's good. That's perfect.
Good, okay. So here's what I'd suggest or offer to you as the place to start for making that big impact, which is, and I've got my rabbit and tortoise up okay here again, that it's okay to go slow to go fast. And I think it starts with if you're here as an individual and not a team, a self-assessment about your district or your school, wherever that situation is that you're working in. Is there a working leadership team, and is it functional? If yes, great. Are there other people that need to be at the table? If no, how do you build that coalition? Who would be those at least 3 people that you would invite to the table to say, this is something that I think we really need to get going on. We need to start talking about what our goal is going to be for the year and how to move this forward so we're not in the same position 12 months from now. So who needs to be at that table? And then start identifying your punch list of the resources and the supports that either exist now or are needed in order to do a sustainable program. It's not good for us with this high turnover to invest lots of money, each of us, in ourselves in training or training others when there's a revolving door there of expertise that leaves. We need to build long-term capacity for comprehensive supports. And who's going to lead that? And it's okay to say, this is something we need and I can't do it. I can't be the leader, but I can be the worker. I can be the behind the scenes. I can be the number 2 person. Or maybe you're saying, I am ready to be the leader on this. I am going to make this impact in my school this year. I'm going to lead this team. This is going to be my mission for the year. And then how do you get that interest and support in developing that plan? And we can talk about that a little bit next week as well. What are the resources and needs that are contextually specific to your community? Some of you are in schools with tremendous community support, school boards and city boards working together, and community activists championing these wraparound comprehensive approaches where housing and economics and all of that development that's going on in the community is hand in glove with schools. Some of you are very rural, very remote, or maybe you're urban and don't have those resources available to you. So where are you now in order to start making small steps forward? And know that it's okay to go slow in order to go fast later. What we are going to talk about next week very specifically is the calendar and timeline for universal screening. I'll review several universal screeners. I'll talk about the epic failures I've had so that you can skip those. I'll talk about the successes that I've had, and some of those might apply to you and what you're doing. It's titled Universal Screening Models and Implementation How-To. It's going to be the same time at 12 o'clock, and you're welcome to come back with a team or a partner. And my optimism here is that this unprecedented challenge gives us a huge window for unprecedented positive change. And I'm including my email for the 100 or more of you. If you have specific questions that I can answer, I will do my best to get to them. And I know that this is a lot. This is one of my favorite cartoons. Professor Herman stopped when he heard that unmistakable thud that another brain had imploded. This is a little bit of drinking from the fire hose in terms of content. And it just feels like that sometimes. But what I want to say to each of you out there is that it doesn't concern me that we are facing this huge, huge task. What would only concern me is if we're not making progress at identifying how do we tackle it. This is an unprecedented challenge, but I think it's also an unprecedented opportunity to fundamentally change how we do business in this country in addressing social, emotional, and behavioral needs of kids and families who are in our schools. That's where they are most likely to get services. That's where they're most likely to get identified as having needs. And that's where they're most likely to have resources brokered to them on their behalf. And if we're going to make a difference, it's here. It's with all of us and what we're doing. And I so appreciate your labors and your emotional investment in your schools and communities. I know that we're facing a hard year, and I just want to offer my support and say I'm here to talk you through what I've been doing and working on, and if that's helpful to you, that's great. I'm glad to be there. So that's pretty much it for the week. We've got about 3 minutes to spare. A few Q&As if you've got it, and I'll let you go on about your days. And hopefully we'll get to see many of you next week. And I would love for you to bring your colleagues or friends, work in teams, and have this be a working session. So, and we'll send out the PowerPoint to you, so you'll have those homework questions if you want to follow up with them. Thanks everyone.
Thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Dr. Vannest for sharing all of this. This is obviously an area that a lot of people are excited about and feeling passionate about. I did put the link to the next week in the chat, and it looks like there's somebody else that just asked for it, so I'm doing it again. So if you didn't see the link in the chat, I just trying to post it again. Hold on. And yeah, we would definitely encourage you. There's 5 more sessions. We're doing these every week. There's some additional sessions. If you look further down on the page, we actually have one on Monday that is going to be talking about universal screening with Dr. Camphouse. And so if you're interested in that one, join. We're also going to have some others doing some demos of how you can implement the universal screening. So there's a lot of stuff that the BASC authors have been doing to support you guys during this difficult time, and that we're here to support you in as well. So thank you for joining today. Take a look at that link. Sign up for as many sessions as you can. If you can't sign up, or sign up, and even if you can't attend, you'll get access to the decks and the recordings and things like that. So we definitely hope that this is helpful for you guys, and we're here for any questions or support that you need.
Thank you, Erin.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Vivian, Kristen, Esther, Bonnie, Lisa, Lillian, Tapita, Audra, Cheryl. Thanks so much for earlier. Shelly, Melissa, Joan, Ivelisse, Brenda, Connie, Trisha, Patty, Amanda, Eudora, Jason.
Can you
Thanks
share
for coming.
your email again?
Sorry, what was that?
Can she share her email again? I missed it
Sure.
on the slide. I know it's going to be in a handout also.
I'm putting it in the chat room now.
Awesome. Thank
And
you.
it should be in the handout as well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And I sent you my email too. So if you need anything, just follow up with me, and we'll do whatever we can to support you guys.
Thanks, Bianca, Victoria, Chelsea, Fadima, Tammy, Veronica, Anna, Darnell, Carla, Abril, Sade, Alvin. Bye, everyone.